Good morning, folks. Tuesday, May 26th. Today, we're going to be going into the concept of succession. And this is actually going to be fairly similar to something that we have already gone over. We're just going to be looking at a slightly different viewpoint of it. We went over evolution before, which was how an organism changes over time based on the changes in its environment and then how that will affect the different traits, different adaptations that organism brings. Today, we're going to look at succession, which you can kind of think in a similar term. Like, it works pretty similar to the concept of evolution, but now we're not talking about a living thing. We're talking about a non living thing. We're talking about an environment. So, succession can be broadly or simply defined as a change in an environment over time. Now, you guys have probably actually all seen this. This is not a rare or uncommon thing. Ooh. Oh, cool. I haven't tried this before. Do you guys like the little running red line? Oh, I like that. I'm gonna use this a lot from now on. All right. So evolution of the ecosystem. And you've probably seen it in something kind of like this, right? This is a farm field. Right now, everything is planted in those nice, clean rows. Everything is maintained. You can see this in a neighbor's yard or something too. This is nicer than any yard I have, but you get the idea, right? Like, it's an area that is maintained. But what I ask happens if the people who are maintaining this area go away? A yard does not want to be close cut grass. A farmland does not want to be organized rows of corn plants or whatever crop they're raising. What would happen to this land if we were to remove the human impact from it and let it do what nature wants it to do? Well, I mean, hopefully, you guys are thinking it would kind of look like this. All right? Now, this area you can see is no longer being maintained. Not really. You can see a lot of things have popped up on this area. We have our tall bushes over here. We have some sedges growing over there. We may have a few small trees in the background, some larger ones off to the side, right? This is what nature wants to do. This is the natural way that it wants to alter and change things. All right, this is the idea of succession. So, succession is merely our scientific understanding of how any given environment will go from this to this. And basically, what we do for our own understanding is we kind of slice it up into different segments so that one can lead into the next. So we like to think about it as stages. Now, the earliest stage is just bare rock, right? Then we see these lichens and mosses will grow on the rocks. They will then be replaced by annual weeds, things that grow during the summer, die in the winter, and then start over. Then to perennials, which means that they will grow year round in grasses. Then shrubs will start to grow in. Soon the small trees will start to grow over the shrubs. And then finally, those great big trees move in at the end. Now, the idea is relatively simple, and that is that one new community is going to replace the previous community. Unlike evolution, though, this does have an endpoint. This does have a goal. Now, that endpoint, that goal, is going to be determined by the biome that this plot of land is found in. So, if you're taking a look at something that is in a temperate deciduous forest, like we have here in New York State, it is going to have a very, very different endpoint than something that is in a desert or in a tundra or somewhere like that. So that's an important thing to note, but because we live in New York State, because you're taking New York State education, I'll give you a wild guess which one they care about the most. Hopefully, you don't require too many guesses. Now, how does this work? How does one community replace the other one? Well, I'm glad you asked. Allow me to teach with my crappy whiteboard. Now, unfortunately, I lack any of the right marker colors in order to simulate dirt. So I'm going to be doing the best I can with things that do not match. So let us first imagine an area. And this green line, I have a feeling we're going to be refocusing a lot here. Come on. There we go. You're working on it. All right, this green line represents our bedrock. All right, when we take a look at the bedrock, what can grow on it? Nothing. Nothing grows on bedrock. Plants can't drive roots down into it. Animals aren't going to live here because there's no plants. Remember, food chains, food webs need to be maintained. And so, what we're going to have first is on here, you're going to have some broken rocks, just fragments of them laying around. Stuff like that. What's going to happen is we are going to get our first phase of things that can live here, and there's very, very few of them. But they're things like lichens. And a lichen is kind of like a little mold patch, but it can grow on rocks. And they actually get part of their nutrition from rocks. And so these lichens are going to grow, and as they grow, they're going to live, they're going to die, and when things die, they basically just fall over. So over time, and this could be decades, this could be hundreds of years, you're going to have now a thin layer of dirt form. Because dirt is really just dead things. Things die, they fall over, they rot, they turn into dirt. Those lichens turned into dirt. Took decades, maybe 200 years to reach this point. But now as soon as we reach this point, now we start to get all sorts of new stuff. Because now, with that thin layer of dirt, we're going to get things like grasses. Now, into those grasses, we're going to have all sorts of other animals now start to show up. Because now it's covered, we're going to have things like worms in the soil. We're going to have stuff like insects show up to eat the grasses. We're going to have the predators of those insects show up, so you might get things like frogs or snakes. You'll get some birds, probably ground nesters that once again feed on things like insects and stuff. All these things are going to live here. And this grassland will take care of them for quite a span of time. But as every generation goes by, as more and more live and die, they fall over, they rot. And next thing we know, there might still be some grasses there, but now the dominant life that's growing here is going to be a little bit bigger than the grass. Now we're going to be looking at things like shrubs and bushes. And with the shrubs and bushes, we now see a scenario where some of those organisms that lived here as the grassland may still stick around. We're still going to get insects. We'll always have insects. We're still going to have the possibility of something like frogs and snakes. But now we're also going to get, hello, Adriana. Now we're also going to get some new things moving in here. Something like a chipmunk who will move into this territory because now it has the appropriate places for him to hide. And the seeds and the berries that will be produced by the bushes and the plants here will be the food that that chipmunk needs. So you see, the old community has now kind of pushed itself out in favor of this new one. And this new one will continue on for a period of time, growing, dying, falling over, and rotting. And when it does, take a guess what happens to that layer of soil. Right? It's going to get deeper and deeper. Now, as the dirt gets deeper, we once again change this community again. And now we're going to see things like small trees starting to grow alongside some of the larger bushes and things because this is deep enough now that they can drive their root system down into it. And with this, we're still going to see our insects. But now, with this much cover, you're going to start to see some other animals move into the area. Things like deer that wouldn't have been here before, but now that we have trees. Now, this habitat will support that community. And these small trees, these shrubs will grow, they will die, they will fall over and rot. And in turn, they will make the soil even deeper. And that will allow then our bigger trees to move in because now they've got a lot of dirt to put out those really huge and extensive root systems. And when we take a look at the animals here, once again, you're going to see that it's changed. Different animals live in different communities. And slowly, this one has changed what can live there by changing those abiotic conditions that exist. This is the concept of succession. Eventually, it will reach some sort of an endpoint. And as long as everything's stable, it will stay right there. So, let me give you guys some actual examples of that. So, this can happen as what we call primary succession, meaning that it has to occur on bare rock. Now, this is your key here. For the forms of succession, primary succession can only really happen once. And it is that first time that rock gets broken down into dirt. From there, that it continues to build up and up and up, and we get more and larger plants. Now, this brings in an important guy that we call the pioneer species. The lichens in the example I gave you are the pioneers. And if you think of old school pioneers, right, they were the first people to like move west into the wild, uncivilized lands, which we now know is a complete crock of crap, but that's where the term comes from. And our pioneer organisms are going to be those first living things that can manage it on bare rock, aka things like moss and lichen. These are all different lichens. The fuzzy green in the background, the leafy green and the leafy brown, that's all lichen. And they produce soil by breaking down the rock and dying. And there's enough soil in this picture that even one fern is able to start to grow on this rock because there's just enough for that root system to get hold of it. Okay, that's part of primary succession because it's got to happen on bare, exposed rock. The most common type that we see is actually going to be secondary succession. The idea here is that the land went through, it reached its normal endpoint, but then something came along and basically just wiped it out. Forest fires are the most common example that we use, but there's all sorts of other things that can do it too. Anything that removes the big trees from this area will reset us back onto an earlier stage of succession. So after that fire burns down, all of those trees have been consumed, that open land will start to go through the steps of succession once again. The soil's already there, so this will happen very, very quickly. You guys have probably seen this happen somewhere near you. I'm sure just about everybody is familiar with a yard or a field somewhere that has started to go crazy and grow back all sorts of stuff because whoever was taking care of it stopped taking care of it. Now, ultimately, we will reach what we call the climax community. Now, if you look, and I know that this is not English class, but whatever, I'm teaching you stuff. So if we take a look at how a book is written, right, you're going to have your beginning. That is what they call the exposition. And that beginning doesn't really do much. But then the story starts to build. All right, the climax of the story should be that to put it in terms of like movies that we're familiar with, that's like the big boss fight, right? That's the big payoff. It's when the big challenge is reached and the characters must overcome that obstacle, right? That is the climax. It is the high point of the story. Well, our climax community will be the high point of that biome. It will be whatever you expect the biome to look like. So for us here in New York State, we expect a temperate deciduous forest, right? This is our climax community. This is what all yards, fields, and other cleared areas want to be. This is what they will become unless we spend time and energy to stop them from being able to. And it's also worth noting, as a final step, a little bit about pond or lake succession. Now, this may seem really weird to think about, but literally every pond and every lake on Earth is filling in constantly. Everything that you have in there that's living is also dying. The things that die fall to the bottom, they rot, and they turn into dirt, soil. Well, that soil year by year will build up. And as it builds up, your pond or lake will get more and more shallow. Eventually, all ponds and lakes will completely fill in. And at the time that they do, you will get normal succession going through those grasses to shrubs to small trees to climax community. So it's weird to think of, but this means that there is no lake, pond, or river on this planet that is permanent. They will all fill in eventually. It may be a very, very long time, but like the topography of this planet, the areas that you can identify, like where New York State is on a map because you can see the Finger Lakes or the Great Lakes or something like that, that's going to change eventually. Those are not eternal. And so that is succession. In the simplest and the easiest means, that is what it means for an environment to change over time. All right, so for today, there is a worksheet. I shouldn't have closed that just yet. There we go. There is a worksheet right here, so the succession fill in. And if you open it up, there's not really a whole lot to it. Couple fill in the blanks, and then down here, I want you to kind of draw. what those stages would look like. If you need help with that, look back into the slideshow. There are multiple examples of what those different stages of succession look like. It should be very quick, very easy, and I hope that nobody struggles with it. All right, so with that, I will see everybody tomorrow and we will move on.